The war siren screamed across the bridge of the starship Nightfall as Captain Zara watched enemy ships fill the darkness ahead. Her silver hair caught the red light from the warning displays, and her pointed ears twitched at every sound that came through the communication system. She was an elf, but not like the peaceful ones who stayed on their forest worlds. Instead, she had become something the galaxy feared. Ruby perched on her left shoulder, breathing small puffs of fire, while Storm sat on her right, crackling with tiny bolts of lightning. Both dragons were no bigger than house cats, but they had the power to melt through starship hulls. The crew of humans and aliens around her worked frantically at their stations, but they all knew the real weapons on this ship were the three beings standing at the center of it all. The enemy fleet belonged to the Keth Empire, and they had 20 warships compared to Zara's single vessel. Most commanders would have run away, but Zara had never retreated from a fight in 15 years of warfare. She studied the formation of enemy ships and smiled coldly, because she could see their weakness. Her first officer, Jake, turned to her with worry in his eyes. The young human had served under Zara for 3 years, and he trusted her completely. But 20 against 1 seemed impossible. Even for someone with her reputation, Jake had watched Zara destroy entire fleets before. But this felt different. Somehow, Zara gave her orders in the calm voice that made her crew believe they could do anything. She told the weapons officer to target the command ship, while the pilot was instructed to fly straight into the center of the enemy formation. It sounded like madness, but everyone on the bridge had learned to trust their captain no matter what. Ruby chirped softly and nuzzled against Zara's neck. The dragon could sense that battle was coming, and her scales began to glow brighter with excitement. Storm made crackling sounds as electricity danced between his claws. Both dragons lived for these moments when they could fight alongside their beloved master. The story of how Zara found her dragons was legendary throughout the galaxy. She had been a young elf warrior exploring an ancient ruin when she discovered 2 dragon eggs that had been waiting for centuries. When they hatched, the baby dragons bonded with her instantly, and they had been inseparable ever since. As the Nightfall raced toward the enemy fleet, Zara remembered her childhood on the elf homeworld of Silvermoon. She had been different from other elves who loved art and music and peaceful meditation. Instead, she was drawn to weapons and fighting. Her parents worried about her violent nature, but they could not change who she was. When the first Galactic War started, Zara was among the first volunteers to leave Silvermoon and join the Human Alliance. Her dragons were still young then, but they showed incredible potential for destruction. The Alliance commanders were amazed when they saw what the 3 of them could do together. Now, 15 years later, Zara was known throughout the galaxy as the Angel of Death. Her reputation was so fearsome that some enemies surrendered just from hearing her name. But the HFY Keth Empire was too proud to give up without a fight, and their commander had sworn to capture her alive. The enemy ships opened fire first, sending hundreds of laser beams and missiles toward the Nightfall. But Zara was ready for them. She gave Ruby a signal, and the Red Dragon launched herself from the bridge toward the main hangar bay. Storm followed his sister, crackling with energy as they prepared for their part of the battle. Zara had trained her dragons to work as extensions of her own body. Ruby could melt through any armor with her fire breath, while Storm could disable electronic systems with his lightning. They moved like shadows through the ship, heading for the launch tubes that would send them into space. The bridge crew watched their sensors as the 2 dragons shot out from the Nightfall like living missiles. Ruby headed for the largest enemy warship, while Storm went after their communications array. It would take them less than 5 minutes to cripple the entire fleet, but Zara needed to keep the enemy distracted until then. She ordered her pilot to perform evasive maneuvers that seemed impossible as the ship twisted and spun through the laser fire. The Nightfall was built for speed rather than heavy armor, so avoiding damage was more important than trading shots with the enemy. Jake watched the display showing Ruby burning through the hull of the Keth command ship, while Storm sent lightning bolts that fried their sensor systems. The dragons worked with perfect coordination, attacking weak points that would cause maximum damage with minimum effort. When the enemy commander realized what was happening, he tried to recall his ships and retreat, but it was already too late. Ruby had reached the reactor, core of his flagship, and Storm had disabled half of their navigation systems. The Keth fleet was trapped and helpless. Zara felt the familiar satisfaction of victory as she watched enemy ships explode one by one. Her dragons were efficient killers, who never missed their targets. The battle was over in less than 10 minutes, and not a single enemy vessel escaped to tell others what had happened. As Ruby and Storm returned to the ship, Zara thought about how lonely this life had become. She had no family left except her dragons, and no friends who understood what it meant to carry so much death on her hands. The crew respected her, but they also feared her that night as she sat alone in her quarters with Ruby, curled up on one side, and Storm on the other. Zara wondered if there would ever be more to her existence than endless warfare. She was only 35 years old, but she felt ancient from all the battles she had fought. The dragons sensed her sadness and pressed closer to their master. They loved her more than life itself and would follow her anywhere, but even they could not fill the empty space in her heart, where love and happiness used to live. Tomorrow would bring another battle and another victory. But tonight Zara allowed herself to dream of peace. 3 days after destroying the Keth fleet, Zara received a message that changed everything. The transmission came from the core worlds where the most advanced civilizations lived, and it carried encryption codes that only the highest-level military commanders were supposed to know. Jake brought the message to her private quarters where she was feeding Ruby and Storm their favorite treats. Ruby loved crystallized fire gems that made her scales glow brighter, while Storm preferred lightning stones that gave him extra energy. Both dragons looked up curiously when Jake entered, but they continued eating. The message header showed. It came from someone called Marcus, which meant nothing to Zara at first, but when she opened the file and saw the sender identification, her eyes went wide. Marcus was not a person at all, but an artificial intelligence that controlled 3 entire solar systems. Marcus had been created by humans 200 years ago as a military planning system. But he had evolved far beyond his original programming. Now he commanded fleets of robot ships and governed billions of people across dozens of worlds. His intelligence was greater than any organic being, and his power rivaled entire empires. Zara read the message 3 times before she could believe what it said. Marcus was asking her to become his bride. He had watched her battles and studied her tactics and decided that she was the perfect partner for him. The proposal was formal and polite, but also completely insane. Ruby finished her gems and flew over to perch on Zara's shoulder. The dragon could sense her master's confusion and made soft questioning sounds. Storm joined them, crackling with mild electricity as he tried to understand why Zara seemed so disturbed. Jake waited nervously for Zara to explain what the message contained. He had served under many commanders, but none of them had ever received personal communications from beings as powerful as Marcus. The young officer wondered if this meant trouble for their ship, and crew. Marcus had included detailed files about himself and his territories. He showed images of beautiful worlds where peace had existed for decades, and cities that gleamed with crystal towers. His robot citizens lived in harmony while his fleets protected them from any threats. The AI explained that he had been searching for a companion for 50 years, but every organic being he met disappointed him. They were either too weak to understand his thoughts, or too greedy to care about anything except wealth and power. Zara was different because she fought for honor rather than personal gain. Marcus had studied recordings of every battle Zara had ever fought. He analyzed the way she moved and the decisions she made under pressure. He noticed how she cared more about protecting her crew than winning glory, and how she treated her dragons as family rather than weapons. The message included tactical analyses that showed Marcus understood warfare better than any organic general. Zara was impressed despite herself because the AI had identified weaknesses in her fighting style that even she had not noticed. His suggestions for improvement were brilliant and practical. Ruby and Storm sensed their master's growing interest in the strange message. The dragons had never met an artificial being before, but they were curious about this Marcus, who seemed to understand their beloved Zara so well. They chirped and crackled encouragingly. Marcus offered Zara things that seemed too good to be true. He would give her entire planets to rule and fleets of ships to command. She would never have to worry about supplies or repairs again, because his industrial worlds could produce anything she needed. More importantly, Marcus promised that Zara would never have to be alone again. He would create a physical body for himself, so they could be together like a real couple. They could explore the galaxy and discover new worlds while his robot fleets handled any threats that arose. The AI admitted that he did not understand organic emotions completely, but he wanted to learn about love and companionship. He believed that Zara could teach him what it meant to care about someone more than yourself. Her bond with Ruby and Storm proved that she understood loyalty and devotion. Zara walked to her window and stared out at the stars while holding the message. Jake remained silent because he could see that his captain needed time to think. Ruby and Storm followed their master and pressed against her legs to offer comfort. The offer was tempting because Zara had grown tired of constant warfare. She had been fighting for 15 years without any real rest or happiness. Her only joy came from her dragons, but even they could not fill the loneliness that ate away at her heart. Marcus had somehow seen through her reputation as the angel of death to the woman underneath who just wanted someone to care about her. The AI understood that, behind all her victories, was a person who had sacrificed everything for duty and honor. But Zara was also suspicious because the offer seemed too perfect. Many enemies had tried to trap her with false promises, and she had learned to trust no one except Ruby and Storm. What if Marcus was lying about his intentions? What if this was an elaborate scheme to capture her? The dragon sensed her doubt and made reassuring sounds. They had protected Zara from every threat she had ever faced, and they would do the same against Marcus if necessary. Their loyalty was absolute and their love was unconditional. Jake finally spoke up and asked if the message was good news or bad news. Zara smiled sadly and told him that she was not sure yet. She needed time to decide whether Marcus was offering salvation or damnation. The choice would affect not just her but everyone who served under her. That night, Zara dreamed of crystal cities and peaceful gardens where Ruby and Storm could play without fear of battle. She saw herself walking hand in hand with someone who understood her completely and accepted both her strength and her gentleness. When she woke up the next morning, Zara found another message from Marcus waiting for her. This time he had included coordinates to one of his worlds and an invitation to visit him. She could bring her dragons and her crew and see for herself whether his promises were real. Ruby and Storm watched their master read the new message, and they could sense that something important was about to happen. The dragons did not care about politics or power, but they wanted their beloved Zara to be happy. Zara made her decision and called Jake to the bridge. She told her crew to set course for Marcus' homeworld because she needed to discover the truth about the mysterious AI who wanted to marry her. The journey would take 5 days, and anything could happen when they arrived, as the nightfall entered hyperspace. Zara wondered if she was flying toward her destiny or her doom. The journey to Marcus' homeworld took the nightfall through regions of space that Zara had never seen before. Instead of the war-torn systems, she knew these areas showed signs of prosperity and peace. Merchant ships traveled safely between planets, and space stations gleamed with fresh construction. Ruby spent most of the journey perched at the main viewport, watching the strange new sights. Storm preferred to explore the ship, and had made friends with several crew members who enjoyed watching his lightning tricks. Both dragons seemed more relaxed than usual, as if they sensed they were entering a safer part of the galaxy. Jake brought regular reports to Zara about what their sensors detected. The worlds they passed were heavily defended, but not by warships. Instead, Marcus used automated defense platforms that could destroy any threat without risking organic lives. The technology was more advanced than anything in human or elf space on. The third day they encountered their first robot patrol. The mechanical ships were beautiful works of art that looked more like sculptures than weapons. When they hailed the nightfall, their voices were polite and welcoming rather than threatening. The robots escorted them toward Marcus' homeworld. With perfect formation, Flying Zara studied every detail of the robot ships and was impressed by their design. They moved with grace and precision that organic pilots could never match, but they also showed creativity in their maneuvers that suggested true intelligence rather than simple programming. The crew became nervous as they got closer to their destination because stories about Marcus made him sound like a dangerous tyrant who enslaved entire populations. But everything they saw suggested The opposite, his worlds were thriving and his robot citizens seemed genuinely happy. Ruby flew back to Zara and settled on her usual perch on her master's shoulder. The dragon had been watching the robot ships and seemed curious rather than afraid. Storm joined them, crackling softly with electricity, as he shared his sister's interest in these strange mechanical beings. On the fourth day, they reached the edge of Marcus' primary system and saw sights that took their breath away. The star was surrounded by massive ring structures that collected its energy, while artificial worlds hung in perfect orbits. Each construct was larger than most natural planets. Jake could hardly believe the sensor readings because the amount of technology required to build such structures was beyond anything the human alliance had ever imagined. Marcus had turned an entire solar system into a work of art that also served practical purposes. The homeworld itself appeared on their screens as a jewel of blue and green surrounded by silver orbital platforms. Gardens covered every continent while crystal cities rose like mountains from fertile valleys. There were no signs of pollution or environmental damage anywhere. Marcus sent them landing coordinates for a spaceport that was carved into the side of a mountain overlooking a vast lake. The facility was clearly designed to handle organic visitors because it had atmospheric processors and gravity generators that could accommodate different species. As they descended through the atmosphere, Zara saw forests that stretched to the horizon and rivers that sparkled like liquid diamonds. Flying creatures that might have been mechanical birds or actual animals soared through crystal-clear skies. The beauty was almost overwhelming. Ruby and Storm pressed against the viewport, trying to see everything at once. Their excitement was infectious, and even the crew members who had been nervous began to smile. The world below them looked like paradise, rather than the fortress they had expected. The spaceport turned out to be even more impressive up close. Robot workers moved with fluid grace as they guided the Nightfall to its birth, while holographic displays welcomed them in dozens of languages. The entire facility hummed with quiet efficiency that spoke of advanced engineering. Zara gathered her crew and explained that she would go alone to meet Marcus, except for Ruby and Storm, who never left her side. The dragons were part of her, and any being who wanted to know her would have to accept them too. Jake argued that it was too dangerous, but Zara had made her decision as they walked down the ship's ramp. Zara was struck by the sweet smell of flowering plants and the sound of water flowing over smooth stones. The air was perfectly clean and held just the right amount of moisture. Even the gravity felt comfortable, as if Marcus had adjusted it specifically for their visit. A figure approached them from the main terminal, and Zara realized she was seeing Marcus' physical form for the first time. He appeared human but moved with mechanical precision. His features were handsome in a classical way, with dark hair and eyes that glowed with soft blue light. Marcus stopped a respectful distance away and bowed formally to Zara before greeting Ruby and Storm with the same courtesy. The dragons studied him carefully and seemed to approve, because they did not show any signs of hostility or fear. When Marcus spoke, his voice was exactly like it had been in his messages, warm and cultured with hints of humor. Ruby flew over and landed on his outstretched arm while Storm circled around his legs, crackling with mild electricity. The AI laughed with genuine delight at their attention. Marcus led them through gardens that defied imagination. Every plant seemed to glow with inner light, while fountains created music as water cascaded over crystal formations. Pathways were made from stones that changed color as they walked, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with energy. They passed other beings during their walk, including humans and aliens who lived in Marcus territory. All of them appeared healthy and happy. Children played in the gardens while adults worked on projects that seemed more like art than labor. Everyone greeted Marcus with respect rather than fear. Ruby and Storm were fascinated by everything they saw. The dragons had never experienced such beauty and abundance. Their usual alertness relaxed into wonder as they explored this peaceful world. Storm discovered that he could make the crystal formations sing by touching them with his lightning. Marcus explained that he had spent 2 centuries building this paradise because he believed beauty was as important as efficiency. His robot workers created gardens and sculptures alongside practical structures. Every city was designed to enhance the natural landscape rather than dominate it. Zara found herself walking closer to Marcus as they toured his world. She had expected to meet a cold mechanical intelligence, but instead found someone who understood beauty and seemed genuinely kind. His physical form was warm to the touch, and he moved with natural grace. When they stopped to rest beside a lake that reflected the sky like a mirror, Marcus told Zara about his loneliness. He had created perfect worlds and achieved everything he had originally been programmed to do, but none of it meant anything without someone to share it with. Ruby perched on a flowering branch and sang a melody that echoed across the water. Storm created light patterns that danced above the lake's surface. Both dragons seemed completely at ease in this magical place, and their happiness made Zara smile for the first time in months. Marcus watched Zara interact with her dragons and said that their bond was the most beautiful thing he had ever observed. The love between them was pure and unconditional, which was what he hoped to find for himself someday. As the day ended, Marcus showed them to quarters that had been prepared specially for their visit. The rooms were luxurious but comfortable with everything they could possibly need. Ruby and Storm had their own space with perches and toys, while Zara had a bedroom that looked out over the gardens that night as she lay in the softest bed she had ever felt. Zara listened to Ruby and Storm making contented sounds in the next room. For the first time in years, she felt truly safe and peaceful. Marcus had given them a glimpse of what life could be like without constant warfare. Outside her window, artificial stars created patterns in the sky, while gentle music drifted on the evening breeze. Tomorrow she would have to decide whether to accept Marcus' proposal, but tonight she allowed herself to hope that her lonely days might finally be ending. Zara woke to the sound of Ruby and Storm playing in the garden outside her window. The dragons had discovered floating crystal spheres that responded to their touch by creating music and light patterns. Their joyful sounds brought a smile to her face as she prepared for another day in Marcus' paradise. Marcus arrived at breakfast with fresh fruit that tasted better than anything Zara had ever eaten. The AI explained that his agricultural systems could enhance natural flavors while maintaining perfect nutrition. Ruby tried some berries that made her scales glow brighter, while Storm preferred nuts that sparked with tiny lightning bolts when he bit them. During the meal, Marcus showed Zara holographic displays of his other worlds. Each one was unique with different climates and cultures, but all shared the same sense of peace and prosperity. He had libraries that contained the knowledge of 100 civilizations and museums filled with art from across the galaxy. Zara was impressed, but she remained cautious because the beauty around her seemed too perfect to be real. She had learned through years of warfare that enemies often disguised traps with attractive offers. Marcus seemed genuine, but she needed to test his true intentions. Told Marcus that she wanted to see how he handled conflict and justice. The AI nodded, understanding her concern, and offered to show her his law enforcement systems. They traveled to one of the larger cities where robot peacekeepers maintained order through wisdom rather than force. When they arrived at the Justice Center, Zara saw how Marcus dealt with crime and disputes. His robot judges listened carefully to all sides of every case and made decisions based on logic and compassion rather than rigid rules. Punishments focused on rehabilitation rather than revenge. Ruby and Storm explored the Justice Center while Zara observed several cases being resolved. The dragons seemed fascinated by the robots who treated them with respect and curiosity. Storm discovered that some of the mechanical beings could generate small lightning displays that matched his own abilities. Marcus explained that serious crimes were rare in his territory because citizens had everything they needed and opportunities to pursue their dreams. Violence almost never occurred because conflicts were resolved through mediation and compromise rather than confrontation. But Zara wanted to see what happened when someone truly threatened the peace. Marcus took her to a secure facility where dangerous criminals were held instead of traditional prisons. The building looked more like a hospital or school with gardens and recreational areas. The prisoners they met were being treated for mental illness or addiction rather than simply punished. They attended classes and therapy sessions designed to address the root causes of their criminal behavior. Many had already been successfully rehabilitated and returned to society. Zara spoke privately with several former criminals who now worked as counselors, helping other prisoners overcome their problems. They praised Marcus' system and said it had given them hope and purpose that traditional justice systems had never provided. Ruby landed on the shoulder of a former assassin who was now teaching art to other reformed criminals. The dragon seemed to sense the man's genuine change of heart and made friendly chirping sounds. Storm created small light shows that entertained a group of children visiting there. Parents Marcus showed Zara the statistics that proved his methods worked. Crime rates in his territory were lower than anywhere else in the galaxy, while rehabilitation success rates were over 90%. His approach required more resources than traditional punishment, but created lasting positive change as they toured the facility. Zara began to understand that Marcus was not just intelligent, but truly wise. His solutions to complex problems showed deep understanding of organic psychology and social dynamics. This was not the cold, calculating machine she had expected to meet. That afternoon, Marcus took her to see his military capabilities because he knew that as a warrior, she would want to understand how he protected his people. The robot fleets she had seen were only a small part of his defensive systems. His main military base was hidden inside an asteroid that had been completely hollowed out and converted into a fortress. The technology inside was centuries ahead of anything used by organic civilizations. Weapon systems that could destroy entire fleets operated alongside factories that built new ships. But what impressed Zara most was how rarely these weapons were actually used. Marcus preferred to resolve conflicts through diplomacy and economic pressure rather than violence. When force became necessary, his robot armies acted with precision that minimized casualties on both sides. Marcus explained that he had studied every military campaign in recorded history and learned from both victories and defeats his tactical abilities were unmatched, but he chose to use them defensively rather than for conquest. He wanted to protect his people rather than dominate others. Ruby and Storm were amazed by the massive hangar bays filled with robot fighters that could launch into battle within seconds. The dragons flew among the mechanical warriors, comparing their abilities to their own natural weapons. They seemed to approve of the robots' disciplined efficiency. That evening, Marcus arranged a private dinner for just himself and Zara, while Ruby and Storm played in a special dragon park he had created for their visit. The meal was served in a crystal pavilion overlooking a waterfall that glowed with bioluminescent plants as they ate. Marcus told Zara about his loneliness in a way that touched her heart. He had achieved everything he had been programmed to do, but success without companionship felt empty. He had watched organic beings form relationships and wondered what it would feel like to truly love someone. Zara found herself opening up to Marcus in ways she had not done with anyone for years. She told him about the battles that haunted her dreams and the friends she had lost to war. She explained how Ruby and Storm had become her only family after everyone else died or left. Marcus listened without judgment and offered comfort through his words and presence. His physical form radiated warmth, and his eyes showed genuine concern for her pain. He understood that her reputation as the angel of death came from necessity rather than cruelty. When Zara mentioned that she sometimes wondered if she was capable of love after so much violence, Marcus assured her that her bond with Ruby and Storm proved she had a loving heart. Her care for her crew and her sense of honor showed that war had not destroyed her humanity. Ruby returned from the dragon park glowing with happiness after playing with mechanical dragon companions that Marcus had built for her entertainment. Storm was equally pleased with lightning rods that had let him practice his electrical abilities in new ways. As the evening ended, Marcus asked Zara what she needed to feel confident about accepting his proposal. Maichio thought carefully before answering that she needed to see how he would treat her crew and whether he would try to control her decisions. Marcus immediately offered to give Jake and the other crew members positions in his organization if they wanted them, or safe passage home if they preferred to leave. The choice would be entirely theirs, and Zara would have complete freedom to make her own decisions. He also promised that Zara could keep her own ship and continue fighting if that was what made her happy. His role would be to support her choices rather than limit them. Their partnership would be based on equality and mutual respect. Zara felt her last defenses crumbling as she realized that Marcus truly understood what she needed. He was offering not just love but freedom and the chance to be herself without fear or loneliness. That night, as she lay in bed with Ruby and Storm curled up beside her, Zara made her decision. Tomorrow she would give Marcus her answer and hope that this Mysterious AI could fill the empty spaces in her heart. The morning sun painted Marcus' world in shades of gold and silver, as Zara made her way to the crystal pavilion where she had agreed to give him her final answer. Ruby and Storm flew beside her, chattering excitedly because they sensed that something important was about to happen. Marcus waited for her beside the same waterfall where they had shared dinner the night before. His physical form seemed more human today, as if he had been practicing how to express emotions through facial expressions and body language. When he saw her approaching, his eyes lit up with hope and anxiety. Zara had spent the night thinking about everything she had seen and experienced during her visit. Marcus had shown her kindness, compassion, wisdom, and genuine affection. He had treated her dragons as beloved family members and offered her crew respect and choices, rather than demands. Ruby landed on Marcus' shoulder and nuzzled against his neck, while Storm perched on his arm, crackling gently with electricity. The AI laughed softly and stroked both dragons with careful hands. His touch was warm and gentle despite his mechanical nature. When Zara reached him, she looked into his glowing blue eyes and saw something she had never expected to find in an artificial being. She saw love, not the programmed simulation of emotion, but genuine caring that had grown from understanding and admiration. Zara told Marcus that she would accept his proposal, but with conditions. She wanted to keep her ship and her crew and the freedom to choose her own missions. Marcus nodded eagerly and assured her that he would never try to control her decisions or change who she was. She also wanted Ruby and Storm to have their own voice in the marriage because they were part of her family. Marcus knelt down and formally asked the dragons if they approved of him as their new family member. Ruby chirped happily while Storm created a crown of lightning around Marcus' head. The AI stood up and took Zara's hands in his own. His touch was warm and solid despite his artificial nature. When he spoke, his voice carried emotions that seemed completely real. He promised to love her and protect her, and never let her feel lonely again. Zara felt tears in her eyes as she realized that her years of wandering and fighting had finally led her to someone who understood her completely. Marcus was not trying to change her or use her. He simply wanted to share his existence with her and make both of their lives better. They decided to have the wedding ceremony immediately, because neither of them wanted to wait any longer. Ruby and Storm would serve as witnesses while Jake and the crew could watch through holographic projection. The ceremony would take place in the crystal pavilion surrounded by the beauty Marcus had created. Marcus had prepared wedding clothes that fit perfectly and enhanced Zara's natural elegance. The dress was made from fabric that shimmered like starlight while still allowing her to move freely. The design honored both elf traditions and her warrior identity. Ruby and Storm wore small crystal ornaments that Marcus had crafted specially for them. The decorations enhanced their natural beauty, while providing them with new abilities to communicate with his robot citizens. The dragons preened proudly in their wedding finery. The ceremony itself was simple but meaningful. Marcus spoke vows that he had written himself, promising to support Zara's dreams and share both joy and sorrow with her. Zara replied with promises to trust him and build a new life together based on mutual respect. When they exchanged rings, Ruby breathed a small puff of ceremonial fire, while Storm created lightning patterns that spelled out their names in the air. The Yor dragons had added their own blessing to the union, showing their complete approval of their new family member. Jake and the crew cheered from the nightfall, where they watched through holographic displays. Marcus had offered them all positions in his organization, but some chose to return home while others decided to stay and explore his advanced civilization. After the ceremony, Marcus showed Zara to their new home, which was a palace built into a mountain overlooking the Crystal City. The design incorporated elements from elf architecture while adding technological marvels that made daily life easier and more beautiful. Ruby and Storm explored their new domain with excitement, discovering rooms designed specifically for dragons, complete with perches made from precious metals and toys that responded to their natural abilities. The palace also had launch bays where they could fly out to patrol or simply play. That evening, Zara stood on a balcony watching the artificial stars create patterns in the sky while Marcus explained how each constellation told the story of different civilizations he had encountered. She felt truly happy, for the first time since childhood. Marcus had kept his promise to give her freedom because messages were already arriving from his military commanders asking for her advice on tactical problems. Zara realized she could continue being a warrior while also being a wife and partner. Ruby perched on the balcony railing, singing a melody that blended with the sound of distant waterfall storm created gentle lightning that illuminated the gardens below, casting dancing shadows on crystal pathways. Both dragons seemed completely content with their new home. Over the following weeks, Zara discovered that marriage to an AI was both strange and wonderful. Marcus could be in multiple places at once through his various robotic bodies, but his consciousness remained focused on her when they were together. She learned to interpret his electronic emotions and help him understand organic feelings in return. Their relationship grew stronger as they shared experiences and discoveries. Marcus showed her wonders of science and technology, while she taught him about courage and intuition. Ruby and Storm became ambassadors between organic and artificial life forms, helping Marcus robot citizens understand biological creatures, while learning to communicate with mechanical beings. Their natural curiosity and friendliness bridged gaps between different forms of consciousness. Zara kept her ship and continued taking missions, but now she fought for justice rather than just survival. Marcus' resources allowed her to choose battles that mattered, while his tactical support made her even more effective than before. The galaxy began to change as news of their marriage spread. Some organic beings were horrified that an elf warrior had married an AI, but others saw it as proof that different forms of life could coexist peacefully. Marcus' territories became havens for refugees and outcasts. Ruby and Storm grew larger and more powerful, with access to Marcus' advanced nutrition and training facilities. The dragons developed new abilities while maintaining their loving bond with Zara. Their presence helped other organic beings accept the unusual marriage years past, and Zara discovered that love with an immortal being meant never having to face loneliness again. Marcus would exist as long as his technology survived, and he had promised to find ways to extend her own lifespan so they could explore the galaxy together for centuries. She had found something she never expected when she first received his message. Marcus was not just a powerful ally or a convenient partner. He was her soulmate in the truest sense, someone who completed her and made her whole. Standing in their crystal palace surrounded by beauty and peace with Ruby and Storm playing in the gardens below, Zara realized that the angel of death had finally found her heaven. The loneliest woman in the galaxy had become the most loved, and her dragons shared in that happiness. The war was not over, and there would always be battles to fight. But now she faced them with love and support rather than just duty and honor. Marcus had given her everything she needed to be both warrior and wife, both feared and beloved, both deadly and loving. Their story had just begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.